this is from the section, The Fear to Look Within, in chapter 21. The Fear to Look Within, chapter 21. Loudly the ego tells you not to look inward, for if you do, your eyes will light on sin, and God will strike you blind. And this you believe, and so you do not look. Yet this is not the ego's hidden fear. Loudly, indeed, the ego claims that it is. Too loudly and too often. For underneath this constant shout and frantic proclamation, the ego is not certain that it is so. So we think that it's sin that we don't want to look at, but at the same time we have a sneaky feeling that this is not the case. For beneath your fear to look within because of sin is yet another fear, and one which makes the ego tremble. What if you looked within and saw no sin? What is the purpose of fear? This is why the Course in Miracles is so brilliant, because its purpose is everything. Once you understand the purpose of something, then we have a chance to undo it. I'd like to read from, this is a Journey Through the Workbook, Journey Through the Text by Kenneth Wapnick. This is only the first 8 chapters, so it's about 5 volumes. A lot of this is what Ken says and a little bit from the Course. He's taking little paragraphs out and then explaining what they mean. So Ken says, to ensure that we never recognize our mistaken choice to be separate, the ego develops a strategy which, in a sense, sets into motion everything that the Course in Miracles talks about. It is essential to understand this strategy and the purpose that it serves. And the purpose is protecting the ego's fear of our choosing to identify with the Holy Spirit's atonement. What we're afraid of doing is remembering that we are still one. Because if we remember that we're still one, which is the atonement principle, then we disappear and we go back into heaven. This is our greatest fear. So our one fear is that we'll get back to our mind and undo our original choice to be separate. This is our fear. So the whole strategy of the ego is to defend against choosing again. Now the next sentence really is the key to what we're looking at today. The ego motivates us to leave the mind, become mindless and not undo that original choice, by first convincing us to be afraid of it. So the ego convinces us to be afraid of our mind, and so therefore we leave it. This is the purpose of fear, to make us leave our minds. Remember, I read earlier, it tries to lessen it, but not get rid of it, because it wants it. It wants us to keep some fear so that we keep away from the mind, the decision-making mind, and keep us looping here in the ego mind. This is the ego strategy. And now we're going to look at this, the sin, guilt, and fear, the first step after separating from God. The ego deemed the separation a sin, and therefore we're guilty, and therefore we have fear of being punished for our guilt, for our sin rather. So the ego made up this myth, again, to keep us away from choosing again. So the fear directly follows from our accepting the ego's myth that we've sinned against God. It's made up. The resulting guilt demands that we be punished for our sin, which terrifies us. This is the fear. This then, I'm basically repeating what he said, this then impels us to flee from the mind into the world. So we run away from the inner mind, the decision-making mind, and we come into the world and have all these problems that we're working with. Needless to say, the ego's myth is all made up. Remember that the threat to the ego is not God or truth, but the power of the Son's mind to choose against the ego and for the Holy Spirit's atonement principle. This is our fear, that we'll choose again. Its strategy, once again, is to render us or keep us mindless by making a body and causing a veil of forgetfulness to fall across the mind, thereby erecting a seemingly impenetrable barrier between the mind and the body. Now we are only aware of our physical identity, cut off from the mind that thought it. So that's the ego strategy.